Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be with all of you. Welcome to this session where we're talking about nutrition. I'm Raj Kumar. I'm the president and editor-in-chief of DevX, and it's a pleasure to be here at this amazing campus with all of you who are in person and then all the people who are following this online with quite an illustrious group that we have here organized on this panel. Excuse me, I'm dropping everything. I'm thinking about this summit, this spring meetings of the Paris Peace Forum, a bit like a tale of two cities, partly because we have Paris in the name, even though we're not there. We're sort of near Marrakesh. But partly because I'm getting a distinct impression of two very different narratives, one coming to me from the news out of the EU and out of the US around elections and politics, and the other is what I'm hearing here from so many of you who are working every day on the very issues we're here to talk about, which is there is a lot of innovation, there is a lot of opportunity, there are great things that are happening and working. So we're going to get into a little bit of that dichotomy maybe in our discussion about how hard this is to make progress on something that in some ways is so simple and basic, or at least appears to be on the surface, and that's around nutrition. You would think we could all agree at a high level that nutrition is important for humanity, and you could get global agreement on that. But it hasn't been easy to make the kind of progress that the world needs on it. And there are people, including those who are on the stage, who are working really hard to change that. And in part through something known as nutrition for growth, which perhaps not all of you are familiar with. So maybe we'll begin with Mr. Nutrition for Growth himself, who's sitting next to me. And that's, of course, Brioc Pont. Brioc is the Special Envoy and the Secretary General of Nutrition for Growth. Maybe just to start, tell us, what is it? Why should people who are not close enough to this issue to know, why should they care?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me with you. I'm Special Envoy Brioc Pont, and my job is to get the international nutrition community together and organize the next N4G summit, Nutrition for Growth, which will take place in Paris on the 27th and the 28th March of 2025. And well, it's quite a challenging mission, I must say. Very interesting as well, very fascinating. You come across people who have lots of stories to tell, like Sean on my side, and many others that I've had the pleasure to meet, including Afshan Khan, with whom we have teamed up as Afshan coordinates the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, the idea is to gather support from the international nutrition community and much beyond to the to nutrition as a development policy, because we realize there's so much at stake. We've got tens of millions of young people, children, facing the scourge of malnutrition. But, you know, malnutrition can be seen in three basically different kinds. You have malnutrition, deficiencies in micronutrients. You have also overweight and obesity. So that makes a lot of challenges to fight back.
And just to your point about Nutrition for Growth being something that goes beyond the nutrition community, it is a summit that has been connected to the Olympics. And that's been done for a reason, right? Tell us a bit about that.
That's a great idea that came from the United Kingdom. You know, Jeremy Paxman, which was a journalist, a British journalist, once said the best thing between France and Britain is the Channel. I don't think he was right. I think there are great things that France and the UK can do together, and I know how, you know, the key role that Britain has played, you know, in bringing nutrition on the forefront of the debate over development. And so in 2013, there was the first N4G summit in London, and then the idea is that every nation that hosts the Olympic Games, the Summer Olympic Games, hosts as well this summit, which is a pledging conference, not only for financial pledging, but also political pledging. And I think that's what makes it really, really important.
Let me bring another panelist into this. Afshan Khan is with us. You coordinate the SUN movement, which is the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, a really critical part of the nutrition ecosystem, let's say, in generating broad public support for things like Nutrition for Growth. You're also an Assistant Secretary General at the UN. Explain, because you're key in what Brioc is trying to do, what is it exactly that we aim to get done at Nutrition for Growth this time? If we're sitting together late summer next year, what is it that you hope we will have accomplished?
Thanks, Raj, and I think that's a really important question, and partly because from the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, we're seeing SUN's networks as being nationally based and working together that makes SUN a unique force. So 66 countries working together with business, civil society, donors, and UN Nutrition. So the SUN civil society plays a strong role in advocacy, accountability, and implementing nutrition actions. So we'll be looking back at some of the stock taking along with GNR of what commitments were made and helping shape new ones. Some business network, and both co-chairs of the business network are here, Abby and Lawrence. They act as a bridge between public and private sectors, helping bring in small and medium enterprises into the nutrition agenda. The UN in convening knowledge management and technical expertise, and the SUN donor network very much influencing and convening their leveraging power. So for the SUN movement, we really see the global gathering that will be coming up in November, end of November, 26th through 28th, as a moment just before the Nutrition for Growth Summit, where we'll be able to really garner this collective agenda and what power they can bring to take forward the change. I think Brieux has committed very strongly to a strong communication agenda. I think that's pivotal. So we're clear on what are the goals, what are the commitments, and how are we going to get there, with some very clear themes emerging that I would say are slightly different from the previous Nutrition for Growth Summit. A very strong focus on gender and what a game changer that can be. And at the SUN movement, we see that as an important illustration of shifts that need to be made, whether it's in the health sector, women's role in food production and access to credit, and business support for helping manage those enterprises, the youth engagement, and youth as being a key, vital call for action and call for change. So we'll be bringing together youth leaders at the global gathering that can feed in to the N4G summit. And then lastly, I would also say that we've seen the power and force of civil society, including implementing partners in countries, those reaching the hardest to reach in the last mile, whether it's your community health worker, whether it's your ag extension worker that is focusing on the production of healthy, nutritious food at an affordable price, as being people whose testimony and experience can be an important, I would say, contribution to the conversation at N4G as we go forward.
And I think that's a great way of framing it, Afshan, because of course it's easy to think of this nutrition problem as a problem of donations. You know, why haven't we donated enough money for food or for micronutrients? But this is a complex food system, and you're thinking at the SUN movement kind of from the bottom up. How do you change this system? I want to bring Sean Baker into this, and I promise I'm going to come back to everybody again. But Sean, you know this very well. You're the Chief Program Officer at Helen Keller International, but you were Chief Nutrition Officer at USAID. You've been very engaged in previous Nutrition for Growth efforts. You used to be at the Gates Foundation leading nutrition work as well. This is not just about money, right? We've heard that already from Brioc and Afshan, but it is also about money. So why has it been so hard to raise money for nutrition?
So I was going to respond to your first point that I have been through some of these rodeos before, and I do tell Ambassador Pont, who I think has become a close friend very quickly, that you can survive them and survive, and it can be incredibly successful, and deeply appreciative for his leadership. I want to also go back to your first point of, and I think this is partly, is that as nutritionists, I think sometimes our message is too nuanced. Malnutrition drives 45% of under 5 deaths. Now, I use the language drive, and some of my colleagues here might say, okay, well, that's not newest enough. It's like it's the underlying cause of, the attributable cause of, it's associated with. But the fact of the matter is, if those children had been well nourished, they would be alive today. And I don't think we're necessarily brutal enough sometimes with our messages. And for those children who survive undernutrition, we've actually deprived them of optimal cognitive and physical development. So we've locked them and their families, into this vicious cycle of poverty and exclusion. So not only does good nutrition help kids survive, it is really building the future. And I think to go back to your most fundamental point of why have not resources been given, and it's more egregious because here's the problem statement, but we have an incredible, powerful set of solutions that we know work across the health system, the food system, social protection programs. But we suffer, and this is where Afshan is here, we suffer fundamentally from an orphan problem of whose responsibility is nutrition. Is it the health sector? Is it the food system? Is it the social protection system? And of course, we need these systems to work together to deliver good nutrition services and nutritious food, particularly for the most vulnerable. And I go to that last point, compared to other sectors where the devastation is perhaps more democratically distributed, I think the most fundamental driver of poor nutrition is that those the most at risk of malnutrition are the least likely to have a voice at the political table. And so they don't get attention because they are excluded.
And I guess that's also part of that north-south divide that we've heard Justin Vallée talk about today as well, this idea that there's now less trust than ever, and maybe nutrition, and particularly undernutrition, is a good example of that, right? Abundance of food in parts of the world, and then yet people who are undernourished in other parts.
So I've worked almost all my life outside of the US, but when I was in the US at USAID, and we were leading the cross-US government global nutrition coordination plan, one thing that really struck me is that, in fact, while the manifestations of poor nutrition might be different between the global south and the global north, the fundamental structural drivers are absolutely the same. And so there's actually much more similarity than there is difference.
Well, we're going to keep getting into this question of what does it take to make this summit successful? And one way we'll do that is by bringing in our next panelist, Chika Morishima, who is an executive officer and the vice president of sustainability and communications at Ajinomoto, which is, of course, the large global nutrition company. But also, you played a big role in the last Nutrition for Growth Summit, which was held in Tokyo around the Olympics. And so we'd love to know, are there any lessons from that experience? What worked and what didn't work that might help our colleagues here about to host this in Paris to make this even more successful?
Yes. Let me talk about Ajinomoto Group first. For over 100 years, Ajinomoto Group has been a global pioneer of amino science, applying scientific understanding of amino acid to bring health-enhancing and sustainable solutions to the world. We have a wide range of business from B2C to B2B, from upstream to downstream of food system, such as food businesses, healthcare business, agriculture, and feed business, etc. I feel that global food companies are currently facing a crisis. Regulators, international organizations, and academia are less willing to collaborate with food companies. This may be due to the growing obesity and NCDs that food companies are perceived as having a negative impact on the health. It is no wonder that food companies are being blamed for it. This is in particular shocking coming from Japan, where the situation is quite different. Japan has the longest life expectancy in the world and has a success story of solving nutrition issues. These include the introduction of a dietitian system and a school meal system that reaches every corner of the population, and the consideration of nutrition value on a menu basis. Leveraging Japan's expertise, the Ajinomoto Group has been working enthusiastically to solve nutrition challenges around the world. Collaboration between the public, private, and academic sectors is essential to solving the nutrition challenge. Food companies must work closely with other stakeholders, including regulators, civil society, and academia, and actively contribute to solving the nutrition challenges with knowledge gained from being close to consumers. We believe that a food environment in which people can be naturally healthy can only be achieved when policies are combined with the delivery of the healthful product and information to consumers. Let me talk about the learning from the Tokyo Nutrition Summit. The Tokyo Nutrition Summit was held in December 2021. The success is that the commitment made at the Tokyo Nutrition Summit has led to the Ministry of Health, Labour, Welfare, in collaboration with academia, the private sector, and the civil society, to begin effort to create a food environment where people can be healthy naturally and without too much stress. Our company is also participating and leading the effort. As we learn, there are limitations to what one company can do. So we realize the importance of the multi-stakeholder collaboration that leveraging the strengths of each stakeholder. On the other hand, this effort remains a voluntary initiative. We feel that in order to expand the commitment further, it needs to be translated into policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chika. I guess, Burak, it seems like one of the key lessons is that this can't just be a government-led initiative. And I think that's something we already heard from our colleague from Sun, from Afshan. But in addition to that, it seems like there's a tension between describing this as a fundraising effort and an opportunity to really rethink the food system, to think about innovation, right? How are you thinking about the way you frame this summit, wanting, as you say, multiple things to happen at once? You want to raise money, but you also are trying to send a different message to the world about the opportunity here around nutrition for growth.
Okay, I think my answer will require a high level of compression, given the vast array of issues you are addressing. When we started preparing N4G, we looked at Tokyo and how Japan delivered a summit in 21. And what we realized is that Japan did not set the bar very high. It set the bar astronomically high. Because at the end of the day, by the end of the summit, they had collected $27 billion in commitments, and when countries were closed, it was 42.6. And when you're asked to organize a summit and match, these kind of commitments, that is something that is humbling, and it takes a lot to make a Frenchman feel humble. I must say that the challenge was a bit scary. But here we are, and what are we going to do? The situation has changed considerably since 2021. There is the Russian aggression against Ukraine. There are other wars going on, of course. The Russian aggression against Ukraine has induced a financial crisis, which is generating fiscal constraints. And there is clearly a lack of of resources among, sovereign donors. So what are we going to do? This is a pledging conference after all, if there's no money. Well, we're going to go after the money where we think it is. And there are a few stones, I believe, despite the tremendous success that Tokyo was, there are a few stones that have been left unturned. We think that development banks could have engaged more actively in Tokyo. Perhaps also a large chunk of the private sector, which is the pension funds, could be also interested in taking a look at moral money. So these are sectors that we are going to engage with, thanks to our partners. I think of Access to Nutrition Initiative, of Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and many others. The idea is to gather the international nutrition community again. That's many stakeholders coming from very different constituencies, be them NGOs, philanthropies, the economic sectors. And also to think that perhaps we should stop thinking in terms of is the next summit going to match the commitments that we managed to secure in the last edition? Otherwise, this is going to become a train wreck. And that makes N4G vulnerable. That makes N4G vulnerable, and I think we need to start thinking quality also instead of quantity. And try to get political commitments as well, and that means securing. I told the folks this morning, I was told that N4G was a tradition. It's not. Swiss democracy is a tradition. N4G started 12 years ago. So let's face it, if we want it to be a tradition, then we need to make it become a tradition. So we are going to anchor it in the Olympic cycle. We created a troika with Japan and the United States. We very much hope, obviously, that then Australia will join, because they have the Olympic Games in 2032, and then 2036, it's going to be Saudi Arabia, Turkey, or Chile, or Germany. As far as I know, the cities that are bidding for the Olympics that will host N4G. So that's the idea, is to make it become a tradition, and then have the participants declare that this is a full-fledged development policy and not an orphan anymore, that we identify clearly those who are in charge.
Yeah, that's a couple of very important points there. One, that you want to establish this in a way, give it deeper roots than it ever had. And the second is that you want to make it more about the qualitative nature of the funds, not just what I like to refer to as pledgeflation. One event to the next, people pledging bigger and bigger amounts. And when you look under the hood, you sometimes wonder, is it new money? Is it being spent in some new way? Is it really effective funding? And so I think those are both really critical points if you actually want to address the underlying issue. Now, we started a few minutes late, and Afshan has a plane to catch. So I want to go to you before you have to jump off the stage and just ask for your thoughts about, pretend Brioc is not here. What do you think the organizers ought to do to make sure this is a different nutrition for growth, given the environment we're living in this year and next year?
Thanks. Thank you. I think Brio has the right idea in terms of embedding nutrition very clearly over the next few Olympics, because what we need is continuity on the agenda, first. Secondly, I think gaining the broader political traction with many of the key stakeholders in building public awareness around the solutions for a nutrition agenda are equally important. Fourthly, when it comes to financing, I do think we need to look at, there's a whole array of different financing instruments out there, but what works best in each country? How do we also curate and cultivate demand for nutrition at the country level, make sure that there's domestic budget investment, and then see which investment scenario works best in each country. And that's where I think Sun can come in to help facilitate that dialogue and discussion with Sun countries to make sure we're getting the right financing solution for the right nutrition issue in each country.
That's such a great point, and really essential given what Brooke described about bringing in development banks and pension funds, right? Because if we're going to be innovative in terms of the finance sources, we need to be innovative in the models of how it's delivered. There has to be demand. Countries might have to bring their own resources to the table. So this is a very different kind of funding than what people might imagine bilateral grant-based aid, right? This is potentially a different approach in a different political moment when there isn't the kind of easy support for large amounts of grant finance. Sean, you've been through many of these. What's different this time as we say goodbye to Afshan? Thank you, Afshan. What's different about this Nutrition for Growth?
What's different? First, I will actually go back to 2021 because I do think one of the hallmarks is both the number and the quality of commitments made by low and middle income countries. It was really stunning. And I think if you've been through other sort of our cousins, replenishment moments for the Global Fund or for Gavi, which tend to still be very much about the donors committing, I do think Nutrition for Growth is now on this brilliant trajectory that it is a collective responsibility and needs a collective response. And we need to drive more financial resources of the right quality, informed by the evidence, and we need to drive the political and the policy commitments that are driven by the evidence. And I do think that Nutrition for Growth 2021 put us on a really good trajectory, and I think that I actually am going to, I also think that, to a certain extent in our nutrition world, 2008 marked the start of, with the publication of the first Lancet series on maternal and child nutrition. And that's really informed a lot the creation of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, the motivation for the different nutrition summits, because it was recognized as a massive burden. We do have solutions, they're not going to scale. But also our evidence has actually changed a lot since then, or changed. The tried and the true is still tried and true, but we also have new solutions. And very critically, while we've not made the transformative change, we have enough evidence that it can be done with the right ingredients, that there is absolutely no excuse for inaction. And that leads me to not totally answer your question, but one thing that's a particular area of a focus of mine, I think, and it goes back to the third Lancet series. One of the signature messages out of the third Lancet series published in 2021 is that there's this enormous opportunity gap in the health system as the world moves towards universal health coverage. Unfortunately, the health system is tending to neglect these incredibly life-saving transformative nutrition solutions that the health sector should be delivering. In fact, we're offering them a brilliant set of solutions to deliver better survival and better health outcomes. And what does that look like? A couple of countries I visited recently, which I won't name, one where now 90% of women, pregnant women, attend at least 4 prenatal clinics. That's a huge level of effort. Fewer than 30% are getting the minimum dose of iron and folic acid. That's inconceivable. Or where one country, which in fact there are no ready-to-use therapeutic foods left in the medical supplies. So they've given advice to stop screening kids because there's no way to treat them. Now imagine we were malaria and we said, well, we're not actually going to worry about treating kids for malaria because we don't have any malaria drugs. There'd be a public outcry. Why is there not a public outcry? So I think really linking up with our sister spheres of influence, in this case universal health coverage, to say nutrition needs to become a marker and a maker of quality healthcare.
Or you can't achieve your goals on healthcare if you're not.
Absolutely not.
And these are, as you say, innovations that have been around a long time. There's actually new innovations on them, though. There's new advances in therapeutic foods, for example.
Or new advances because we're moving beyond iron folic acid to the prenatal vitamins that women in the global north systematically get. So yes, we keep improving the evidence base, and how do we rapidly accelerate the uptake of new knowledge, be it more upstream knowledge or best practices in a much more rapid way, because we can't wait.
I want to bring in our audience to see if we have questions or comments or what you think we're missing here, but I want to see if Chika has a thought she would like to add to the discussion while you all think of your questions. If you have something you would like to add to what you've heard.
今、じゃあ、please allow me to speak in Japanese、今、ショーン・ベイカーさんのお話を聞いていて、まだその、栄養学の知見が、グローバルサウスにも生かされていないっていうお話がありました。やはりその、世界は、一つではなくいろいろな側面があるので、グローバルノース、グローバルサウス、我々は、まあ、グローバルノース、日本にいますけども、でも、ASEAN でも大きな仕事もしていますし、アフリカでも、仕事もしています。そういう意味で、さまざまな側面を、一つではなくさまざまな側面を見る必要がありますし、やっぱり、欧米と、アフリカだけで例えば、代表して考えてはいけないのかなと思うんですけど、その辺をちょっと皆さんのご意見を聞きたいなというふうに思います。
So, as Sean Baker said, that Global South does not fully use the knowledge of the nutrition knowledge, and then Japan is a part of the Global North, regarded as a Global North. But still, we cooperate with ASEAN and African countries, and we always realize there is regional differences, and we have to respect regional differences. In that respect, we shall not confine our argument in Western countries and African countries, but we have to inclusively take part in that kind of the Africa, ASEAN, and other countries.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone here in the audience have something they would like to hear from this panel or a comment you'd like to make? Just raise your hand if so. I know there's some nutrition expertise here, so feel free. Otherwise, we'll keep going. Okay, Briok, I'm coming back to you. The audience is shy still. Let's see if we can get them engaged in a moment. One of the things we haven't talked as much about, although we've referred to it a little bit, is market shaping. Chika talked about global food companies and how there's sometimes a negative perception of their role, especially around obesity. Is there a role for nutrition for growth in thinking about food systems? Are you thinking in that wider aperture for nutrition for growth, or is it more about things like micronutrient deficiency and very specific interventions around undernutrition?
That's a big question. In fact, what we see, I mean, when you ask people what they think nutrition is, there are generally you get two answers which are basically wrong. People start telling you about the domestic approach of nutrition, which is the food labeling and the cool apps that their kids have on their cell phone to scan products at the supermarket, local grocery, and others will tell you nutrition, that's a sort of development policy for these poor kids in Africa who are really ill and suffer from hunger. When in fact we know that it's much wider than that. Different forms of malnutrition, stunting, wasting, deficiency in micronutrients, and also now the obesity and overweight is really skyrocketing.
30% of the world, right?
Yes. So, and you have some regions where really the rates are like 80% of the population is impacted, and that has a very, very important weight on public finance. But it's about, if you look at the population getting older as well. In my country, France, 75% of the decisions to go to the elderly house is taken because of the malnutrition of the elder. So this has also an impact on public finance. Our core target is the 1,000 days between the beginning of pregnancy and the second year, which is extremely important in the development of the human being. However, it touches everyone. So I think that has a lot of consequences also for the market shares when you look at the way the industry engages with this issue. And so, a big opportunity for companies as well to address that and try sometimes to change their approach.
Yeah, so part of it is, I guess, reframing the public's perception of what nutrition is as an issue. As you say, this is connected to the Olympics for a reason. You want everyone in the world to pay attention to it. This is not just a convening for, heads of state. And as you say, a lot of people in the world, average people, think of nutrition maybe in a different way than experts like a Sean Baker might think of nutrition, and you want to change that mindset, right? Thinking of your expertise in this, Sean, and since we have time and no other questions at this point, but raise your hands if you've got one. Your former boss, Bill Gates, had his annual letter this year, and he talked about in it the microbiome and the kind of opportunities and advancements based on our new understanding of the influence of the microbiome on human health, including pediatric health. He talked about breastfeeding and the role that it plays. You began to talk a bit about innovation and what's new in therapeutic foods, et cetera. What should change in our nutrition interventions based on what we now know about the microbiome?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I actually pose myself the same question. I'm a biologist by training, so I'm not really a nutritionist, and I deeply appreciate it. But I also see that, I think it's important we continue to drive innovations like better understanding the microbiome and other ways to actually move the science into evidence-based solutions. But we also, to me, it has to be a continuum of let us make sure we're delivering at scale and high quality what we know works right now. Because if we're not doing that, we're never going to deliver anything new. So to me, it's a continuum. And sometimes I think, as in many parts of global health, we can get a bit too seduced by some flashy new evidence, whereas something like breastfeeding is in fact the definition of being a mammal. And it works so well because it's an inherent part of us as a species. And so how do we continue to drive what we know works and learn not just the what works, but how it works, because that how it works is going to be essential to introducing any new solution. And a case in point, and I'll actually circle back to something you said about market shaping, because it prompted a reflection that actually was showcased, I think, on the 31st with the Women's Tennis Association in Paris, and I'll come back to it. But a case in point, for example, is iron folic acid, which has been the standard of care for pregnant and lactating pregnant women in low and middle income countries for 50, 60 years, which we're still not delivering well in most situations. And if we're not delivering that well, then introducing a much more effective product, the multi-micronutrient supplements or prenatal vitamins, which is the standard of care in the global north, I mean, we're going to face the same barriers in terms of the supply chain, the price, making sure those frontline workers have good contacts with moms, that moms are coming to the prenatal clinic. So to me, it's not an either or of the tried and true and the new. We need to make sure we're delivering the tried and true as a pathway. And the last point I want to drive home, which I think is extraordinary, is that when people are committed to actually making these things more cost effective, it can happen. And Kirk Humanitarian has been able to make almost price equivalency between iron folic acid and the multiple micronutrient supplements. So if there's a real focus of driving down prices, it can happen to make these things more accessible so that the systems can support them.
Yeah, there's a real science, as I'm sure many of you in this room know, around scale. How do you scale things? Because there are so many examples where there are interventions that work at a very small scale, but trying to make them really address the many millions of people who need them, it fails, it falls apart. And as you say, we now have in this space, in the nutrition space, good examples of things that have worked and have scaled. I'm thinking about vitamin A as an example.
Vitamin A is probably, to me, there are two poster children of nutrition solutions at scale. Salt iodization, which has been around now for 100 years, and we can use that learning to make sure that other forms of fortification of condiments and staples go to scale and really, at least at a bare minimum, secure essential nutrients in the food system. Vitamin A is a good one, but if we can do it with vitamin A, which is depending on community health workers, which is depending on supply chains, we should be able to do it with other things through the health system. But the others, we really, often we've not gotten to that next step. I mean, there are cases of, for example, maternal supplementation. There are at least two real outliers in the positive sense of countries that have really high-performing programs, Nepal and Cambodia. Nepal is based on this incredible cadre of female community health volunteers. So there are enough examples of scale that we know we can do it. And so that I think, to me, that, again, coming back to something that's new, is that we have enough examples of scale that we can't say anymore, we can't do it. If
Yeah.
we know we can do it with the right political will, the right capacities, and the right resources.
So speaking of what we can do, and coming back to something Briok mentioned earlier, which is obesity, I wondered if we could get the take from anyone on the panel who wants to jump in, Chika, perhaps you, on the scale of the obesity challenge today and what kinds of strategies Briok and his colleagues organizing N4G might pick up to try to address this.
前回の、栄養サミットではコミットメントがたくさん出たと思います。で我々は、協力マルチステークホルダーが協力してやっぱり次のステップに行かなければいけない、コミットメントから、ポリシーに変換していくということが必要じゃないかと思います。
So in the last summit, we have lots of commitment is proposed in that summit, and then much stakeholder must take part in that the process, and then we have to turn this commitment into the real policy to realize this commitment.
で政策につなげるためには、政策に変換するためには、やはりサイエンスベースのエビデンスというのがとても必要でありいうことがあります。で、それだけではなく、その政策が現実的にきちんと受け入れられるためには、つまり生活者の行動にきちんとつながっていくためには、やはり生活者の栄養のリテラシーの向上であるとか、あるいはその生活者の行動の背景にある価値観を変えていくというようなことがとても大事になってくるかと思います。
So in order to turn the policy into realistic policy, we need scientific evidence in order to realize this achievement. And then in order to realize this achievement, it is necessary for the educated consumer to have more access to the knowledge and also So in order to achieve the access of the consumer to the realistic knowledge, it is necessary for the changing value, raise the literacy of the consumers.
どんな商品を選べばいいのか、どう使えばいいのか、健康的で美味しい食事をどのようにして作ったらいいのか、そういうことを生活者がより知るようになる、あるいはできるようになるということがとても大切で、プライベートセクターとして我々はそういうことをしっかりとサポートしていきたい、あるいは生活者に消費者に働きかけていきたいなというふうに思っています。
So in order to achieve better choice of the product, and then in order to enhance better way of cooking, it is necessary for the as a private sector, we have to promote this knowledge to the consumer.
Thank you. Yeah, we could probably have a good debate here about consumer knowledge versus regulation, but go ahead.
Well, and I was going to jump in. I also am going to punt to, because this is not an area where I'm an expert. If I'm an expert in anything, I'm actually going to ask Mira to jump in and help answer this question. But I do think, to me, where it comes together the most logically is the food system. A healthy diet is a healthy diet. It tackles undernutrition, micronutrient malnutrition, and helps reduce overweight and obesity. And some striking findings that we have come across as Helen Keller with research was supported a number of countries through the Gates Foundation, so I've sort of tied to it on both sides of my life, was really pretty shocking that in that critical period of 6 to 23 months when kids need very nutrient-dense foods in addition to breast milk, how much that period, that what we call the complementary feeding period, is being inundated with ultra-processed unhealthy foods, which are bad in their own right, and they're displacing more nutritious foods. So to me, that's just this, and I live in Senegal, I see that all the street vendors are selling these, all the shops are selling these crisps that are highly attractive, very low cost, highly convenient, kids crave them. So we've got to work both on crowding in more nutritious options that are equally attractive and convenient and safe, And I'm convinced we also have to work on the regulatory environment so that we're trying to actually protect children's diets. So we need to promote children's diets and protect children's diets, which is addressing both undernutrition issues and overweight and obesity. But I don't know, may I ask Mira to
Please.
come in and take the phone?
We're running out of time, so keep it brief, but tell us your quick thoughts, Mira, and tell us who you are.
Okay, thanks. I'm Mira Shaker. I'm the global lead for nutrition at the World Bank. So first, I'm going to go back to your microbiome question very briefly. Abby and I were having this conversation over lunch. The first 1,000 days pretty much determines your microbiome as well. Whether you're breastfed or not, that determines your microbiome, stays with you forever. Whether you have a normal delivery or a C-section, that determines your microbiome. And as we've always said, whatever happens in the first 1,000 days, it's not like Vegas. It's like Vegas, sorry. It stays with you forever. So don't underestimate the first 1,000 days, even on the overweight obesity side. What is the scale of the problem? It's not just 30%, it's 40% today. And what is very interesting is that 70%, we always used to think this is a problem of the rich countries, rich people. That's how we always, actually the data says 70% of the overweight obese individuals live in low and middle income countries. And so the low income countries are dealing with what we now refer to as a double burden of malnutrition, both the undernutrition agenda as well as overweight obesity. And that costs them, in 2019, 1.8% of GDP. If we don't do anything about it, by 2060, it will be 3.6% of GDP, $18 trillion. We're looking for money, Brio. There's money right there. But that can be saved by doing the right kinds of things. So it's about putting in place the right kinds of policies. That includes fiscal policies on unhealthy foods, taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages, 57, and everybody tells me whenever I bring this up, everyone says, oh, it's not going to happen. It's a political decision. Yes, it's a political decision. But today, 57% of the world is covered by SSB taxes, and it's growing. And many of these countries are coming to the bank and saying, we want to do this for ultra-processed foods as well. So the appetite is there. If we are able to do this, we'll save trillions of dollars in healthcare costs, in increased productivity, so on and so forth. But, and there's always a but, taxes are not the only solution. They need to be accompanied by what Chico referred to, consumer education. Certainly, if we want to shape the market, consumers shape the market. We need to educate them. We need to put the right kinds of labels in them. We need to do regulations so that companies are not able to sell these unhealthy foods to school kids, for example, in school cafeterias, over television when kids are watching this thing. I remember having a conversation with a large food manufacturer. They said, oh, we have the solution to vitamin A deficiency. What is it? Vitamin A fortified potato chips. And that happens all the time. Sure. So we need to deal with these things. And perhaps two other really quick things. First, it's important to, we've seen countries like Chile. Chile has done an amazing job in putting in place these marketing regulations, taxes, labels on unhealthy foods, so on and so forth. And they're seeing results. So don't tell me it's not possible. It's very possible, and it's possible at scale. Last thing is around policy coherence. We, the global community, on the one hand, we tell people, don't eat too much sugar, leads to diabetes, cardiovascular, da-da-da. On the other hand, guess from the agricultural subsidies point of view, sugar is the second highest subsidized food or agricultural commodity in the world. But there's always a good news too, which is that the world is starting to have this conversation about repurposing these agricultural subsidies, anywhere from, I've said it earlier, to $600 to $800 billion dollars a year, every year. And those can be repurposed so that they have benefits. And between the money we can collect from taxes And the repurposing of this, we can finance the nutrition agenda. So I'm the eternal optimist.
We needed that optimism. Thank you so much, Mira. And Brio, maybe you can have the last word here to close us out, which is precisely to the roadmap from here. Right? You now have a room full of supporters for Nutrition for Growth who want to make this successful. What can this group do to make you successful? What are the things you need to see, all the elements of the global development, global health, nutrition community do between now and next summer to make Nutrition for Growth what it could be?
Well, I must say it's an amazing community, very diverse, with a lot of resources and with a lot of knowledge. And we've identified a number of moments where we can, take advantage of the visibility of the event to beat the drum, and then try to spearhead the international community itself into engaging with nutrition, pledging ahead of the N4G summit. So there will be plenty of occasions, just like this one today, as we are here in Morocco. And I'm thinking of New York. There's a high-level forum on food security. We'll be back in New York in September for the United Nations Crazy Week in September. There's the fall meetings at the World Bank in October. A number of also regional events. We are going to launch the EU for Sun initiative, I believe, in El Salvador next semester. There's the Kigali gathering of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. So plenty of occasions to be the drum, but also we need, local chapters, if you like, of the Sun movement to make noise as well. And I very much hope that we can get this communications campaign on track, bringing celebrities to help us. I say always, spread the gospel of nutrition, and share with the public opinion that this is a policy that works, that delivers, that is good for those who obviously benefit from it, but also good for governments and for taxpayers, and it makes the world a better place. And that's what we want to do.
Well, I started this session saying there's a tale of two cities, and no doubt the political results we've seen yesterday in the EU and in Paris included. This is a year that is tough politically because there's a big, strong movement against global cooperation, against a lot of what we're talking about here, and for isolationism and taking care of your own issues first. But one thing that maybe is stronger is the issue of nutrition, which is truly cross-cutting, which affects literally everyone in every country, and the Olympics. Those two things together are a powerful combination, and I hope you've heard a sense of what's actually possible going forward. It's certainly going to be one of the biggest stories that we cover at DevX in the next year. So thank you all for being a part of this session. Please join me in thanking our fantastic panel. And our excellent interpreter, Takahashi-san, who did that on the fly. Thank you, sir. That was excellent.